This Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by Competitive Edge Research. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like Competitive Edge Research. We are very grateful for all of our supporters, and we will recognize their support during the show. Competitive Edge Research, San Diego's premier public opinion research firm, sponsors this podcast because they like good journalism as much as they like good polling. Since 1987, Competitive Edge has helped clients see the why buried deep within the numbers. Competitive Edge designs comprehensive research studies, collects bulletproof data, and employs robust analytics so you'll understand why things are the way they are. Competitive Edge. Know what to do. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
Welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Cocoa. This is the Voice of San Diego on the radio. My name is Scott Lewis. Here are my friends, Andrew Keatts.
Yo.
Sara, Libby.
What's up?
Hi, guys. So I got to speak this week at the Public Policy Committee of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Got to.
Did you ride in on a scooter?
Interesting use of got to.
And turns out they're fans. There's a few fans of the pod in there. Hello, everyone. And I did get a query, though.
Oh.
There was one woman in the back. She said, were you guys drunk election night when you recorded that podcast? And I laughed. I'm like, that's a funny joke. And she was like stone cold, like straight.
So, no, but were you drunk?
And I was like, no. So the bottom line, we weren't. I don't know about you, Andy.
No, I definitely wasn't. I was working.
Yeah.
Just drunk on...
Punch drunk, right?
Yeah. Well, sort of, yeah.
We did have, what is the food we get? Where's that place called?
Golden chopsticks.
Yeah, everybody gets pizza and stuff.
Yeah.
We got golden chopsticks, the wings and noodles and stuff they sell there. Woo!
There is an election night fatigue that sets in that is a lot like drunkenness. I remember covering my first election at Politico at like 4 a.m. I texted someone the words Senate sleep blanket. That was it.
Oh, like you maybe
like I was just deliriously tired and had been covering Senate races.
Let's be clear.
And that was my message to them.
Something does happen to you at midnight.
Yes.
Like your eyes start to glaze. I mean, everybody does.
Yeah.
But something does descend on you. Fair
Yes.
enough, correct?
There is something odd about political reporters' reactions to election night, which are otherwise exactly the hours that sports writers just keep regularly.
Yeah. Like, we're like, oh, it's so late.
Yeah, like filing stories at 2 a.m. is like, oh, it's Monday Night Football again.
I think I ate 5 servings of that food that night.
Yeah, I had a lot of fried wings.
So many wings.
But what's good about California elections is they just keep giving.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Every day for 2 weeks or so, you get to, at 5 p.m., click to see what the updated results are. And often there's news. It just keeps going.
2020 November, we should just not even cover election day.
Yeah.
Just be like, well, we
We're
will
gonna
cover
check
this in 2 weeks.
Yeah, because otherwise our takes are garbage.
Yeah.
So just
do we have any big takes we have to walk back from that from that night of
There's
show?
some that we should like tiptoe back.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
none I think that we were outright wrong on.
We
Well,
did.
the one we were most confident on the city council that might change, or that would definitely not change, was Vivian Moreno.
Yeah.
Which ended up being the closest one.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
it looks like she's still going to hold on. But
I think we are in trouble on Brian Mainshine. We did base some analysis on him easily winning the Assembly 77th. He's losing about 600 votes a night, 600 to 800, and he's down to about 3,000 vote difference, and there's still a little less than half the votes remaining to count. So
half.
I mean, half
How
of
are
the
the-
remaining, half of what was remaining at election.
Okay.
So to be clear, he's still winning. He's
Yes.
not winning by nearly as much.
We'll definitely figure it out by Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
all 5 of our too close to call over-unders for our election contests have all flipped to the under. Yes. So including the 50th Congressional District, Duncan Hunter is at what we called it. We put the line at 53.5. He's at 52.8 and falling. I don't think this one will close. It's not like a main channel, I don't think. But it is falling. And the gap, it went from a pretty decisive win you could base some takes on about Hunter to like, wow, this was a squeaker.
Yeah, and it's interesting because probably a lot of people voted in that election, so there could still be a lot remaining, but yet it's still a pretty big margin, so he would have to win like every single vote.
Right.
And who knows if there's even enough.
Right. Well, so for those of you at home, should I do this? Should I read so they can score? Is that all right? No.
There's no need for that.
All right. Well, we'll grade your contest.
Fine idea, but don't do it.
We'll grade your contest as soon as things are a little bit more settled. But let's move on. So we have a great interview coming for those of you who stick around on the show. Brigette Browning, she's the head of the local Unite Here, the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union in town, just fresh off of a win of a strike at the Westin Hotel downtown. And she's obviously heavily involved in the labor coalition and got involved in some of the city council races and other things. I'm going to talk to her about the future of the labor movement, some of the things she did, and the election results and what she's looking forward to. Last night, we had our Brews and News event, and we got some good content. David Alvarez, the sitting city council member, is about to be leaving office after 8 years. He showed up and talked for a little while. He announced that he called and conceded the race for the community college district to Sean Ello, who, wow, that's a big win for Sean.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. That's the type of race that in my brain, it's like, well, nothing that anyone does will change the fundamentals. David Alvarez will have name recognition and ballot title going for him, and that should carry the day. But it didn't. Sean Ello ran a much more spirited campaign. David Alvarez really didn't seem to run a campaign at all. And Sean won.
Yeah, and I thought David Alvarez was very gracious last night, talked about how he wanted to help Sean Ello, and he really recast it. So remember, Alvarez had already sort of made clear that he was going to run for 2020 District 1 County Supervisor race. Greg Cox is leaving that seat. That's a prized seat. That's a really high-level local politics. A lot of people say County Board of Supervisors is a step above City Council. I think that's fair. It's a better job. It pays better, more territory, that sort of thing.
On account of it pays better and no one bothers you nearly as much.
Yeah, it's a better job. It's literally a better job. So we'd all assumed he was going for that, and that this was like some sort of weird, like he was holding the seat or something if he got this college district seat. He tried to recast it last night as though, no, he was genuinely reconsidering running for County Board of Supervisors, and he wanted to take this seat as a way to just keep a part-time presence in politics while he pursued something new. In fact, he said he's thinking about getting out of the game now, politics altogether.
I kept saying to reporters all the time, I don't know if I'm running for supervisor. I don't think at this point that I am. And so with that in mind, I don't know that I am. I don't think that I am. Things happen, but I'm looking to do a career change, if you will.
He went on to say that if there was a spectrum of 1 being he was definitely not going to run for county supervisor, to 10 being that he was definitely going to run for supervisor, he was only at a 3. Now, look, politicians who lose elections the day or two after they lose that election, they are very interesting people to talk to. And they often have things like this to say, like, I'm never running again, for example, is one thing they often say.
Correct.
That often proves to be untrue.
Yes.
In the long term.
Yeah.
However, that was kind of interesting. He went on to describe the sort of transactional culture he said he was getting repulsed by at City Hall and sort of the insiders and institutions around City Hall, the special interests. And he basically tried to describe, how there was vote trading, how when he wanted to be city council president, He got undercut by somebody who was willing to be more sort of loyal, do whatever the labor union wanted that person to do. Myrtle Cole in this situation, kind of really trying to recast his kind of fall from where he was the mayoral candidate, the almost de facto leader of the local Democratic Party, to where he is now as, a result of this transactional culture of him not marching in step. And, and then Georgette Gomez, she was also at our Brews and News event. It was at Iron Fist. Great crowd, a lot of fun.
A lot of podcast listeners there. By the way, thank you guys for coming up and saying nice things. It's always pretty cool to hear that we are not just talking into these mics with no one listening.
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah.
And Georgette Gomez, she also made that sort of case, but she made a similar case that Monica Montgomery has made in the past. She, of course, beat Myrtle Cole for that District 4 seat. She was saying that the powers that be, the institutional power at City Hall, used some of these minority districts. These districts are dominated by, I guess, majority districts dominated by, people who were sort of trading their vote to be part of the power structure, as opposed to really representing these underrepresented areas. And so, they kind of cast themselves as this them being on the community side of this community versus transactional culture, whether it was labor or Republican establishment. Is that a fair description?
Yes, and I thought it was really interesting when Georgette was saying it because, well, one, she grouped herself into with two other people that won this week. She said that Vivian and Monica both ran very community-centric campaigns that didn't have that sort of institutional backing, and she said that she saw her own race from 2 years ago much like that, and that the three of them would be similarly situated on the city council. It's interesting because she's doing so well, she's got the MTS chairmanship. She's also said last night she is interested in making a bid at the city council president. If she did that, she would have a seat on Sandag. Her political career is on the rise. So it was kind of surprising to see her pit herself against these institutional forces, which I thought she was.
She was managing well, you're saying?
Yeah, I thought she was managing them well. So I don't know exactly what to say. It's like, it makes sense when David Alvarez says it because he's on the way out and he's got these wounds, from the last few years. But Georgette, it seems like
you could balance it. I think you could say I am succeeding because we're gaining more ground in this sort of movement. And she did. Yeah, she made clear. Again, she represents District 9, which is City Heights, the university area, San Diego State University area, and Talmadge and those areas. She represents that, and she's, like you said, she's having success, and she may very well become council president. She said she wants that. She was very clear. She wasn't ambiguous about that. And yeah, she is a rising star. So I don't know how that's going to play out. It's called, by the way, going for CP, council president.
Going for CP.
Yeah. That's what they say.
I'm not saying that.
Alvarez. So I wanted to get a little more insider how it works, how they meet together. Yeah. So it turns out they can meet. Each one of them can meet with 3 other council members before it becomes an illegal sort of meeting.
Serial meeting.
So if you can pick 2, if you're one of the Republicans, then you end up talking to your 3 Republicans. You can't talk to your other. But now there's only 3 Republicans total, so they can reach out to another member of the council. It's fascinating.
He had an interesting little tidbit that he said that long ago, the first time that Sherry Lightner took the council presidency from Todd, he said he watched Sherry Lightner walking around with a Republican, and he went to Todd and said, "Hey, buddy, did you see that? You might have something to worry about there."
And sure enough, he got ousted as council president.
Interesting tidbit.
So we'll see how that's one of 2 major decisions coming up at the San Diego City Hall with this new city council coming into office. Before that new city council does, though, we're probably going to see a decision on whether there's going to be a special election for a hotel tax increase and expansion of the convention center and homeless services funding and road repair and I don't know, something else probably. And that's coming up probably before the new council takes its seat. And then, of course, the discussion right after that of who gets to be council president. It seems like Georgette Gomez, Chris Ward, and Barbara Bree are all going to go for that. That's a big position, or it can be a big position, right? All right, so I think the story of this election is turnout. It looks like when all the votes are counted, turnout in last week's election in San Diego County will reach 65%. I mean, that is extraordinary. In the midterm election of 2014, for example, 45% of San Diego voters turned out. I mean, there's only one cause of that, right? Trump?
I think so. It doesn't seem like people were motivated by the stadium issue in the way that they might have been with the Chargers, but they didn't even know what the measures were about. So,
yeah, I mean, we didn't have any like big or local races that drove turnout.
No, there's no mayor's race. The governor's race was snoozer. It turned out like
district attorney's a big race, but that was settled in June.
Yeah. So 65%, and it's hard not to see like people's losses, like Zaff's loss, as just a function. Lori Zaff, District 2 Republican, narrows makes the supermajority on the city council for the Democrats. It's hard to see her loss in anything but, a dissatisfaction and opportunity for those voters to weigh in against Trump in any form they could, which was, Labor Council and other places making that connection that Zaff was tied to Trump, even maybe though she may not be or whatever privately.
Yeah, it really seems like in districts like the 52nd and the 53rd, where the congressional races weren't competitive, that it trickled down to this city council level where voters wanted to have some sort of say, and like whether or not it was appropriate for Trump to be influencing their vote in those races, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing, the one data point that is inconvenient to any sort of larger narrative is Chris Keatts' re-election win.
I don't know that it is, though, because he did take pains to distance himself.
He did. Although, how many people do we think knew that?
Yeah. I mean, there's no like narrative that fits cleanly across all of the elections that we saw in San Diego.
Yeah. But I do think there is something, I think you could put like 3 or 4 points of what happened to Lori Zaff on just straight hustle in the district, right? Chris Keatts, there's no question, hustles in the district. Staff's all over, like all these issues, they're present, very present. And I'm sure there was some problem with Lori Zaff in District 2 with that. But even if you add, 3 or 4 points to her, that's still, she lost by like 14, 13.
Yeah, it's not,
it's brutal.
Not remotely close.
But I think another one that we may have to recast is this one, Assembly District 77, which we highlighted as you highlighted as one to watch. I have heard that people got more mail in that race than they got in any previous race at all. Flew completely under the radar for local media, but it looks like Brian Mainshine, the sitting incumbent Republican in that assembly district, may very well lose. He is losing enough votes every count that it's going to be right down to the wire. Very close one.
Even if you judge by whatever his biggest margin was, probably on election night, it was still so much smaller than it has been in recent years. And like, what has he done that would, really cause voters to freak out other than, maybe cross the aisle for a housing bill that wasn't all that controversial, that I don't think would have sparked a really intense backlash. So there's really no other way to explain that.
I have heard from Republicans that there's concern that he kind of slept on this one, that he still has a ton of money in the bank, that he didn't deploy it, he didn't think it was a problem. And then some of them start to raise alarm like, hey, I'm getting flooded with mail from this race, like 20 pieces. And, what are you doing? Is this a worry? And you see people like Todd Gloria walking in the district for Sunday Gover. She has this kind of enthusiasm among the schools in that area, the Scripps area.
He did have a lot of money. I think he had over $2 million, which is, a lot for a state assembly race.
Fascinating. All right, there is one beef that we are so here for this week. This week on Twitter, former San Diego City Councilman and radio host Carl DeMaio poked at Chris Keatts, the city councilman, over a new rule at City Hall that the city attorney put in place, to try to protect and clamp down on any practice of leaking documents. It's inspired, of course, by Keatts' decision a couple of years ago to share a legal analysis with the investors behind the failed Soccer City measure. So Carl said something like, we should call this the Chris Keatts rule, which was the first public shot of apparently a low-level beef that they've had. And Keatts shot back, quote, "Remember that one time that Kogo radio host won a November election?" Yeah, me neither. DeMile's campaign. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see that
You
until
didn't?
just now. That's
hot content, man. That was good.
It's fiery.
really good.
It's really, I'm so here for this.
The best part is his little, he signs the tweets that he
Yeah.
personally writes. So it was CC.
Yeah.
DeMile's campaign, of course, to repeal the state's gas tax increase came up short by 12 points last week. Whew. So this feud that DeMile apparently has with Keatts and with Mayor Faulkner, I don't know, in fact, a local prominent Republican he doesn't have a beef with.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't know.
know.
Lori Zaff, I
Couldn't
guess.
tell you.
I don't know. He's Scott Sherman. Anyway, so yeah, I'm here. You guys want to feud? I'm into it. All right. Our hero this week. Gene Cubison, 35 years he has been at NBC 7 San Diego. He's a friend and mentor to me for many of those years. I guess going back about 11 now. I've done plenty of debates with him, plenty of shows with him. He's come talk to me. I love Gene Cubison, and he's retiring. He's not dying. He's retiring. He's around, and hopefully he will continue to mentor, lecture, and do some reporting or something. And he is, but he's, I think, the dean of local sort of public affairs reporting, and I'm going to miss his voice, his good, deep voice. Yeah, see those have you seen those old pictures of Gene Cubison?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he had the good beard and stuff. Fantastic.
Sleeves rolled up.
Yeah.
Love that.
Our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
This one goes to Mike Schaefer, likely the new member of the California Board of Equalization. He's now leading Joel Anderson by more than 25,000 votes. What a guy.
What a guy.
What a guy. So he's run as both a Democrat and a Republican before. He's now running as a Democrat, which seems to really helped him in this wave that we've been talking about. So this is a guy who's run for almost every office there is. He's run for Congress. He's run for Senate. He's run for mayor of Palm Springs. He's run for DA in San Diego. He's run for DA in San Francisco.
Wow, I didn't know it was all that. Yeah.
He's run all these various things. He's also been, convicted of crimes, including spousal abuse. He's been convicted, I believe, of assault and battery in Nevada, where he was also disbarred. Just a very weird thing. He told Jesse Marks that he decided to run for equalization instead of assembly at the last minute, and it really worked out.
Yeah, he said he did well in the primary because nobody knows what the Board of Equalization does.
Exactly.
All right, stay tuned. We have Brigette Browning. We also have a special feature this week, sort of answering one of your questions. For those of you on podcast, stay tuned. This has been the Voice of San Diego in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo. All right, this week we have a special feature for you. Lisa Halverstad is reporting out a really interesting story. There's, of course, this week, Mayor Kevin Faulkner and his team rallied behind a controversial plan to open a new homeless navigation center in the former skydiving center downtown. It's not the first time we've had the idea of a major housing navigation center. So we asked, or you asked, actually, members of the public asked for an explanation of what a past idea was, and Lisa is here to help.
Welcome to the People's Reporter, a Voice of San Diego feature where we gather questions from listeners like you, then answer those questions. This week, the City Council approved a plan to create a downtown one-stop shop for homeless services. Sound familiar? There's a reason why. Almost a decade ago, San Diego leaders had a vision for that sort of downtown one-stop shop. But what they eventually got wasn't quite what they first envisioned. I'm Lisa Halverstad, and I recently looked into this after Ed McNulty of Sara Mesa asked us whatever happened to that nearly decade-old plan. Back then, the city asked nonprofits to submit bids for a downtown service center, plus housing and shelter beds. PATH, a Los Angeles-based nonprofit, proposed putting the temporary beds, apartments, and services at a single facility, the World Trade Center building downtown. The concept changed as PATH negotiated details with city officials and tried to get buy-in from residents. PATH didn't want to just operate a drop-in center. Residents and businesses worried that the project that was meant to aid homeless people could draw a lot of homeless people and bring more blight and crime. PATH worried about the impact to the neighborhood too. In the end, PATH agreed to focus on homeless clients within a quarter mile of the building and to only have clients enrolled in their programs use the services there, meaning someone couldn't just walk in and get help. Then PATH and the developer, Firmed Housing, got to work on the building that they called Connections Housing. The final sticker price? $39 million, and it was covered by sources including tax credits and millions of dollars from local housing and development agencies. The city also later agreed to help subsidize the shelter, providing hundreds of thousands of dollars annually to support PATH's 150 short-term beds. Connections opened in 2013 with lots of fanfare. City leaders barricaded the block around it and spent an hour giving speeches. They talked about replicating the model elsewhere in the city and the 36 agencies they expected to provide services at the center. But the project hasn't been replicated elsewhere, and today just over a dozen service agencies regularly visit the center. Connections has not been the transformative project that city leaders envisioned. It struggled to meet city targets to move homeless San Diegans into housing, just like other homeless service nonprofits here. There have been some successes, though. Connection Shelter has helped hundreds of people move from the street into homes. And nearly all of the folks who've moved into the project's 73 permanent units have remained there for years. Connections reports that the number of homeless people in the quarter mile around the facility has also more than halved since it opened in 2013, and neighbors have had fewer complaints than expected. It just hasn't been the game-changing project that San Diego leaders had hoped for. And now, Mayor Kevin Faulconer, a key player in those past conversations, is pushing that one-stop shop concept again. We've answered Ed's question. Now it's your turn. What do you want to know about San Diego? Send us your questions. We'll choose the best ones and ask readers to vote for their favorites. Then Voice of San Diego will investigate and share what we learn. Go to voiceofsandiego.org/peoplesreporter or text us at 619-202-9051. Your question could be featured in an upcoming episode.
The following is a sponsored message from American Medical Response. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. When accidents, injuries, or emergencies happen, American Medical Response is there. American Medical Response has been caring for patients in San Diego County for over 65 years. As an exclusive 911 emergency medical response provider within the community, AMR wants to remind you to stay safe, San Diego. To learn more about AMR, visit amr.net.
We are back. Actually, I am back. This is Scott Lewis. I'm joined in the studio by Brigette Browning. She's the president of Unite Here Local 30. Welcome, Brigette.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I'm just going to jump right in. You have had quite a couple of weeks, huh?
We've been very busy, yes.
All right. So let's start with the strike at the Westin downtown. It's called the Westin Gaslamp, I guess?
Yes, the Westin Gaslamp.
Not really Gaslamp, though, is it?
I think because Westin San Diego was taken by the other Westin down on Broadway.
Got it. Okay. So let's, I want to get my hands around this. We obviously saw you guys out there a lot. You must have been out there.
37 days.
Wow. Okay.
5 a.m. to midnight every day.
I imagine there's like a lot of tensions inside strikes too, that it can start to get hard.
Yeah. It was the most amazing experience of my life and also the most intense experience of my life. Yeah. If you can imagine not getting a paycheck for 5 weeks, how you might respond to that emotionally, and then times that by 100, and that's basically what the strike was like.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's get to understand that real quick. So, how many employees does a hotel like that have?
So our hotel had 160 employees, but we were part of a national campaign,
right,
which was over 7,000 employees.
And so Westin is part of Marriott.
Right.
And this was a strike, but it wasn't all Marriott. I went and stayed in one in Phoenix and such, so it wasn't all.
It was Boston, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, us, Honolulu, Detroit.
Okay. And this was all employees? Are they all represented?
Yes, they were the wall-to-wall union, yes.
All in the Westin?
Yes.
Downtown. And so they all had to leave, or was there some that didn't?
Yes. We can't force people to respect the strike. It's a voluntary decision. The vast majority decided to respect the strike and came out with us. And there were some that decided not to.
When that decision is made, is that a vote that has to take place? And what were the causes of what were the actual things you were going for that was causing disgruntled?
Well, we had been in negotiations for almost a year, and the Westin contract, it hasn't been union for a long time. This was its second contract, and it had really fallen behind the downtown standard. So, for example, the room attendants in downtown, which are room cleaners, they were mostly making $18 in the union properties. At the Westin, they were making $14.25. So it was a huge disparity. And in negotiations, the company was barely moving. They were coming in with very insulting proposals. They weren't agreeing to pay for our health care, which is our number one benefit. They weren't agreeing to go into our pension so that our members could have a secure retirement. And so the process was, we called for a strike authorization vote. That passed with, I believe there was one no vote in the vote. And once we have the permission from the members to call the strike, we did go back to negotiations to give the company like a final opportunity to correct their ways. And they still came in with very offensive proposals. And that's when we decided to actually go out on strike.
And how did it coordinate with the national movement? They obviously have different situations and benefits, right?
Yeah, it was a very interesting process because we had things we were negotiating on a national level, and then we had things we were negotiating on a local level. So the wages and benefits were basically local level negotiations, and so we did start having national negotiations in Las Vegas, but just talking about the national issues. So we were talking about things like what happens when jobs get automated and people lose their jobs. What happens when food and beverage concepts change? Because as rates of pay get higher, corporations look for ways to cut jobs. Like, you'll go into restaurants now and not see hosts anymore, for example.
Or the iPads or something.
Exactly, as a cost-saving measure. But that means that we have less people that have jobs. And up until now, we haven't had any protections when those things happened. And so we were able to secure national language regarding those things.
What kind of protection? What does that look like?
We got like language about retraining, that the if robots were brought in and someone wanted to become the robot technician, the Marriott would pay for them to go to school to learn how to take care of the robots. It was where there would be new jobs created, our members would get first priority to get those jobs. And in the food and beverage concepts, we have a much bigger seat at the table to try to help craft what the new food and beverage outlets would look like. So that it wouldn't just be Marriott coming and saying, okay, well, we're going to shut down room service, which is something they're doing across the country. Like the hotels are deciding we just don't need room service anymore. It gives us an opportunity to say, well, what if we changed the concept in room service, but we still kept jobs so that our room service servers don't lose their jobs? So it actually gives us more power in the process than we had before.
Okay. And the Westin still tried to operate while this was going on, right?
Yes, they did.
How does that even work? Like if the majority of people are out, did they bring in temporary workers?
So they were bringing in temporary workers from agencies. We believe that there was flagrant labor violations happening, at least based on the testimony of the agency workers who were coming out afterwards and telling us things like they were being paid in cash. They were being told to fill out paperwork in somebody else's name with somebody else's social security number. There was a lot of malfeasance going on with the temporary contractors. And actually the labor commissioner came in and did an investigation and brought 7 investigators into the hotel to look at the subcontracted company.
So you're allowed to have people come in and try to temporarily fill those positions, but you got to follow those basic rules about employment and such, or you're not allowed to?
Well, no, you can bring people in,
Mm-hmm.
but you still have to follow state and federal work laws. So telling somebody to work under an assumed name obviously is a violation of the law.
Yeah.
Paying people in cash is a violation of the law. And Marriott ultimately can be held responsible for that because there was a law recently passed in California which holds the Marriott as a joint employer for the actions of the temporary agency. So if the temporary agency is found to break the law, Marriott can be held accountable for that. And I think they ultimately will be because I believed the temporary agency workers.
Okay, fascinating. So this is happening obviously right during the height of campaign season as well. So there's, I noticed you got a lot of attention from local politicians who are supportive of the cause. A lot of people came out and walked with you. Were there any that stood out that really made an effort to show up there and for whatever reason make themselves present and helpful?
I would say Barbara Bree, Chris Ward, Georgette Gomez, they were there so many times. It was remarkable. But also Scott Peters came a number of times. He had his staff bring food, which was always people were very grateful to receive the food. Juan Vargas came and walked with us for hours. Bernie Sanders came.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which
Yeah.
that was amazing.
Yeah.
People were over the moon when Bernie Sanders came to support us.
So we'll talk about how it was resolved, but it starts to get going on a second month almost, and then there's Bernie comes, stuff like that. So what were some of the tensions that you had to work through? There's obviously neighbors that were, I got a letter from the guy that shines shoes. There was a few other things like that. But what were the hardest parts to get through other than the difficulty of these folks trying to survive without a paycheck?
Well, the most heartbreaking moment was when the police told us we couldn't have drums anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we agreed with them as kind of a compromise position to take with the surrounding neighbors. Because the architecture of the hotel made it almost like its own wall of noise.
Right.
I think it really exacerbated the sound, just the way the building architecture was. And so I think maybe on the fourth or fifth day, the police asked us to stop having the drums, and we did. We agreed to that. Obviously, it wasn't enough for some of the neighbors. The shoe shine man in particular was adversely affected. And we felt bad about that, but we also thought Marriott is his landlord. He rents from the Westin Gaslamp. We thought Marriott should be making him whole because we didn't want to be out there. But we also didn't want to continue to be treated like second-class citizens from the world's wealthiest hotel company that's generating obscene profits. And I would just say this. Why should us, the taxpayers, subsidize these kinds of companies? It doesn't make any sense. If their employees are qualifying for public assistance that you and I are paying for, I think there's something fundamentally wrong. They should be paying enough that their employees don't qualify for public assistance, so that we're really holding corporations accountable to create good jobs.
Which was the central message you had. One job should be enough, right?
That was the main theme, that you shouldn't have to work 2 full-time jobs.
Why was losing the drums heartbreaking?
It gets a little boring to picket for hour after hour, day after day, and having people with good rhythm and keeping up the chants it made it much more fun for us. Okay,
interesting. You've done this before for me, but let's do it again. What is the landscape of how many local hotel employees are there, and how many of them are you organized with?
So we represent about 30% of the Class A hotel industry. Mm-hmm. We have 6,000 members, but that also includes the airport and some gaming members. But the vast majority of them are hotel workers.
So Class A is
a full-service hotel. It's not a Motel 6.
Got it. And so 30%. So how many people is that about? Of the hotel
we probably have 5,000 hotel workers in the county.
And so your goal, I guess, would be to do all of them, right?
100%, yes.
And someplace like Vegas, is that like 100% or?
It's very close. The places where you see high salaries like New York, San Francisco, Las Vegas, it's because the vast majority of the industry is union.
Okay. And that's what you're aiming for, something
Yes.
on par with that. And how has it grown? Has it changed?
We are growing very fast. I think I could say one of the fastest growing private sector unions in San Diego, both because we've been getting organizing agreements from companies before the hotels are built, but also because we're organizing bottom up in existing hotels. And we're currently organizing about 1,000 non-union hotel workers.
Oh, okay. And that involves some tense situations, I'm sure, itself, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult because employees are putting their jobs on the line to try to demand something better for them and their families. And that can be a very scary experience for people, especially people that don't have huge savings accounts that can cushion them if they were to get fired, which they often do.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about like new hotels that get organized or that, are a little bit easier, I guess, if you get some neutrality agreements.
Right.
But Westin wasn't new.
No,
So
it wasn't.
Was that when did that happen?
We organized it in 2010 and got the first contract in 2011.
So how do you start to get a break with that tension? Like it's a tense strike. It's hitting a climax. What was the first sign that things were going to get better?
Well, the company reached out to us and said that they wanted to go back to negotiations. They had already settled in Detroit and Oakland. So we felt that was a positive sign that they were coming to terms with our sister cities. And so we came back on Tuesday and we negotiated until 6 a.m. in the morning. We were still apart on a couple key issues, and people felt like we just needed to get some sleep because everybody was kind of foggy. And so then we agreed to come back on Saturday, and we ultimately finished the contract on Saturday.
Okay, so can you share some of the details or of the wages and stuff?
I am excited to share some of the details. Our room attendants who are making $14.25 are going to $18 between now and July.
Oh my.
In 7 months, they're going to $18 an hour, which is a tremendous contract gain, which I have not seen before. Everybody who wants to can go into the defined benefit plan, the pension plan. We got real workload protections for the room attendants. We got increased service charge for the banquet servers. We got fully paid healthcare for the family. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's an amazing contract. And I have to give the company credit that they really did right by their employees at the end.
So this is interesting because it's this confrontation, but at this point you switch to a partnership with them.
It's
and
a
now
love fest now.
Yeah, so now you try to promote them. You want events there and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
Huh, that's fascinating. Well, congrats.
Thank you.
That's quite a story. I think it was present in a lot of people's minds for a while, but it's rare that you see sort of a clean conclusion to something like that. So,
yeah, you hear a lot about strikes that weren't successful.
Yeah.
I think the hotel industry has a unique vulnerability in that they don't want their guests coming into the lobby upset before they've even checked into the hotel. It's kind of contrary to the idea of hospitality. And I think the members did a really good job of ensuring that the guests were not happy as they were checking into the hotel.
And how do you do that without, like, you're not attacking the guests because the guests may not even know, but you do want to communicate to them that, you should reconsider.
We ask them not to cross the picket line.
Yeah.
And guests don't like hearing chanting for
Sure.
their entire stay, which is basically what was happening.
Wow. Well, fascinating to see. So, is any others coming soon?
I hope not. It was a lot of work. It was an amazing experience, but I think all of our staff needs a few days of rest.
Okay. Well, I want to transition a little bit. So while you were doing that, of course, there was also this campaign going on. Last we talked, we were in the middle of this sort of divorce and change with the Labor Council. Since then, you've rejoined the Labor Council. And that has got a new leadership, a new direction and such. How are you feeling about the Labor Council and the labor movement here?
I'm feeling really positive, actually. I think if Bob Filner was the apex that was only around for a few weeks, and then we went back to kind of a Pete Wilson type San Diego, I feel like we're getting back to that apex again. And I'm really excited for 2020. I feel very confident that we're going to have a great mayor. I'm not sure who's going to prevail, but I think we're going to have a good mayor. And Dr. Jen winning, I'm so excited about her and changing the District 2, I think, is really going to have a big impact on the city politics.
What kind of policies? So that creates, we're talking about Jen Campbell in District 2 City Council, that gives the Democrats a 6-3 majority on the City Council, veto proof. And I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, they could really run and be a strong council form of government in a way. They could really set the agenda depending on who they choose as leader and what kind of policies they choose. What kind of policies would you recommend? Are there specific, we've talked about vacation rentals in the past, stuff like that. Are there specific things, though, you would want to drive forward on?
We would really like to see Civic San Diego reformed. We don't think it works for everyday people. We think it works only for developers. So that would be a huge priority for us. Obviously, because they rescinded the short-term visitor ordinance, we've got to come back with something that's substantially different. And we're working with council people to try to figure out what that would look like. Those would probably be the first two that come to mind from our local standpoint.
Yeah, let's talk about both real quick. So Civic San Diego is this entity that processes the development permits for projects that largely conform to the plan for downtown, the zones, and yet it's not a city agency, it's not a city department, it's a quasi-independent department. You've and others have had them in your sights for a long time, wanting to, I think, make it so that all these projects had to go through the city council, where ostensibly you could help sort of require better worker protections for them. Was that fair?
We wouldn't say that we wanted them to be appealable to the city council, so that if a citizen had a real issue with a project, they could present it to their elected officials, and the elected officials could make the decision. Because oftentimes what happens now is Civic San Diego, an appointed body, is the ultimate decider of a permit. And we don't feel like they have the same accountability to everyday people that our elected officials do. And it's a very insular organization. I don't know if you've ever been to their meetings, but it's basically an organization of developers for developers. And maybe that made sense when downtown was blighted and nobody wanted to come down here. But I feel like it's really changed, and we should change with that. And so, should there be an affordable housing component in every project? I think there should be. But Civic San Diego doesn't necessarily agree with that because they don't have the mandate from the city. And I think we could do a lot of really good things if we could give our elected officials more authority in the planning process.
Mm-hmm. And you specifically, would that include, requiring new hotels to have neutrality when it comes to organizing unions that are part of them?
Actually, my idea was a little different in that, you can get these floor area bonuses. Sure. if you build to a certain level of environmental friendliness. I don't understand if somebody's going to commit to build middle-class jobs, why couldn't they get the floor area bonus too? I actually think we could do positive things rather than punitive things to reward developers who want to do right by their employees, because there are people like that. They're just not all of them.
Interesting. So you're talking about letting them build more units if they provide better jobs or guarantees for that.
Yeah, I think we should. And we could do a coalition with affordable housing where if they committed to this number of units of affordable housing and this type of jobs, then maybe they get some breaks on some of the permitting processes. I think we could come up with something very proactive if the council had the ability to do that. And
switching to the vacation rentals, so just briefly review. So this council kind of shocked everybody, passed this law that said you could not have a unit set aside for vacation rentals alone. You could rent out part of your house. You could leave your house for up to 6 months and let that be rented out. But you could not have a second house, or somebody in Arizona couldn't have a house here that they rented out full time to vacation rentals or vacation to visitors to San Diego. And the Airbnb and other platforms raised money, circulated a referendum, forced that to the ballot, and the council decided rather than let that go to the ballot, they would just rescind their own rules. And now, as you said, they have to pass something substantially different. For a year at least, they can't pass the same thing again. They have to, if they want to do something else, they have to do it substantially different, which I think would mean they'd basically have to let a unit be allowed to be rented out. Is that fair? I mean, is that the kind of conclusion you're working around?
Well, the Airbnb's line is just a lie, because all they talk about is the sharing economy, but they don't make their money on the sharing economy. If you rent out your room or you go somewhere during Comic-Con, that's not where they make their money. They make their money on people who buy a property and convert it 365 days a year into a vacation rental. So what we were trying to do was stop that.
Right. And
I do believe that drives up the cost of housing. You take housing units off the market, of course, it's going to drive up the cost of housing. It can't have a similar component like that you have to be living there. But I think we can come up with something that is fair and that stops the proliferation. I mean, the problem is, if you look at the numbers, it's just exponentially increasing. And I think you'll see at some point entire neighborhoods converted into vacation destinations. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the beach communities,
Sure.
where I lived in Golden Hill for many, many years. It's proliferating there as well.
Did you move away from the one that was right next to you?
I did.
Oh, wow.
We needed a bigger house and we couldn't afford Golden Hill anymore.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately.
So when we talked last year about this, I guess it was probably this time last year, you were pretty frustrated with Chris Ward. He was one of the city council members who had been supporting, I think, up to 3 units that you could have in addition to your own place, and renting those out to vacation. I keep saying that, to visitors.
Right.
But yet now it seems like things have been repaired. He switched. There was a lot of rumor that you put a lot of pressure on him to support what eventually became this kind of de facto ban on having a separate unit rented out just to visitors.
I talked to Chris about it for many, many, many months. I think it was totally Chris that came to the conclusion that this wasn't good for the community. I'd like to believe that I have that much power, but I really don't believe that was the case. I think Chris independently decided this is the right thing to do. And he's been great. And he's been working with us now to try to come back with something different.
Do you have any idea what that would look like?
I think it would be something that doesn't have the same restrictions for Mission Beach, because the Coastal Commission did have an issue with the ordinance for Mission Beach, because those aren't people that are living in the properties. And we don't want to pass something that ultimately gets overturned by the Coastal Commission. We want to pass something that the Coastal Commission is going to embrace.
That's interesting. You think that maybe just carving out Mission Beach could get through that?
I think you'd have to do something different for Mission Beach. I don't know if it would be a free-for-all carve-out, but I think it needs to be something different for Mission Beach to make sure the Coastal Commission is on board with it.
Huh, fascinating. I wanted to ask about something else, too. So we're all on the edge of our seats to see if the mayor and the majority on the city council tries to do a special election for the convention center, the hotel tax increase, the convention center expansion, and it would fund homeless services and such. You have been in the past a little bit ambivalent about that. I think Labor and others have become more supportive in the new system and the new project that's been laid out. What do you think about the idea of a special election coming forward, and is that something you would support?
Well, I would support what the broader labor community decided to support, but the question is whether the 50% plus one threshold stays, because I can see a path to getting there if the 50% plus one stays. If it goes to 2/3, it doesn't matter when you have the election; it's not going to pass.
Yeah,
and you depending on who you talk to, you get many different answers, and so it's a gamble, I think.
And so that might motivate you to get it on the ballot sooner.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the argument she's talking about, of course, is this Supreme Court ruling that seemed to open the door to a legal theory that if you have a citizens initiative to raise taxes, you only need a simple majority vote as opposed to 2/3. There are two, I think, cases going forward, or at least in San Francisco, there's something going forward that's going to test that. And that case or the legislature or the voters could close that loophole anytime in the next 2 years, it feels like, right?
Yeah. But I think if you're going to have a special election vote, it's going to happen before the new council's sworn in.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, so I guess going on with that, though, so you're not, what you're saying here is you're not saying you're against a special election early. You see the argument for doing it sooner.
I understand why people think that's the best path to win.
Oh, you're not quite into it though, huh?
I've never been a huge fan of the convention center going backwards towards the bay. I've always felt, and I think I've told you this before, that I thought having it go across Harbor Drive would be a more iconic way to expand the convention center and preserve the park for the public. But I wasn't in the steering committee.
Yeah.
So
why not?
I don't know.
Seems like you might be.
I don't know. You know, the workers are often taken into account, like when they figure out that the kitchen doesn't work, the location for where the ballrooms are.
Yeah.
After they've built it, we find that happens a lot, or they make the hallways too narrow to get the carts through. We have some places where that's happened. It's kind of ironic that they don't actually talk to the people performing the job. There was,
as I was watching this develop over the last year, there seemed like there was some tension or differences between the Building Trades Council. Tom Lemon leads that, a group of unions under that, and the relatively new head of the Labor Council, Keith Maddox. Am I picking up on something real, or are they pretty much partnered?
No, I think all of us want the convention center to get expanded if there's a path to win. I think the question has been, how do you win? And I believe is where the difference of opinion has been. Not fundamentally, do we want the convention center to get expanded or not? Because we do believe that it does drive an economic engine for the economy.
And that Maddox might be on the side of like, it needs to get done quick. We need to get it out there quicker. And Lemon and others might be like, well, we can relax a little bit with it.
I think that they're together. Okay. I haven't seen a division in meetings that I've been in.
Got it. We had David Alvarez at an event last night, and he, as many politicians, when they lose an election, they are often really interesting to talk to that day, and he was too. And he said he just conceded his election for the community college district, and he tried to make this distinction on the city council that there's a sort of community Democrat, a Vivian Moreno, Monica Montgomery, and a Georgette Gomez, and then there's this like transactional, more establishment-y Democrat, and that he's very encouraged because he sees these other three coming up from the community, and that this transactional world might be getting pushed out. Is that a framing you would agree with? And he was really directly talking, I think, about labor unions within that.
I actually take great offense to that. There are no districts where I have more members than 9, 4, and 8. Those are my members. The people that were on strike, Latina women that are not rich. So to act like my members are not part of the community, I don't understand that perspective. It's ludicrous. And I take great offense to it. And this is the kind of politician I have an issue with. If they tell me to my face, Brigette, I can't get there with you, and I know going into the council hearing they're voting against me, I can be upset about it, but I understand because they were honest to me. What I can't handle are ones who say, well, if you could do this and this, I can get there. And I do that. I get this added, I get that added. And then when we go to the council hearing, they're voting against us. Like, that's very disingenuous. And I don't think that has anything to do with the community.
So along with that discussion is your union did support Myrtle Cole for her reelection, and actually had some pretty significant mailers that went out against Monica Montgomery. And then there was this kind of backlash from the community there. We talked about it, or some members of the community it was basically saying you had crossed a line, and that they're going to remember that. I never got a clear definition exactly on what remembering it might look like. But how do you what's your perspective on why it was necessary to support Myrtle that much and what the concerns were about Monica Montgomery?
Well, Myrtle took some really hard votes for us, and I feel like I need to be loyal to people who take hard votes for me. It was nothing personal. And, politics is nasty. They were hitting Myrtle. Nobody was hitting Monica. I felt like somebody needed to help Myrtle win. Obviously, it didn't work, but we're just loyal.
Mm-hmm. What were the votes that she took?
And she was very good for us on the Town and Country, which was not an easy vote for her to take. And that meant a lot to us, and it meant a lot to our members.
What was the deal with that?
They were rezoning the property. They wanted to make it part residential and part hotel.
That's right. And you were able to get some conditions on that.
Yes,
right?
we were. And she was very helpful in that.
What do you think about the council going forward? You mentioned you're excited about the majority. You're excited about Jen Campbell. Are you excited about Monica Montgomery and Vivian Moreno?
Well, I've actually never met Monica.
Really?
Yeah, I've never met her. I'm excited to meet her at some point. From everything I hear, I think she'll be great. Mm-hmm. Georgette Gomez, I believe, is going to be council president, and I think she's going to take us in an incredible direction. And I believe that Vivian and Monica will get on board with Georgette's vision, and that's really exciting to me. We were the only union that endorsed Georgette in the primary.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we've been very close to Georgette for a long time. So I think we're going to make real changes for real working people.
Yeah, she was at our event last night and confirmed that she was going to go for council president, and that seemed interesting. And so I was going to ask you about that, but it sounds like, do you support her for that role?
I think she's an amazing candidate for that role, and I think she has the votes for it.
Yeah, so she'll be busy. She's got MTS. She's got, if she does get that, she'll be on council president. She could take a seat at Sandag, too.
Yeah, we need to clone her.
Well, we'll test her managerial skills about how you can delegate and stuff.
Yeah.
So, well, that was all the questions I had. What other things do you think people should know about this state of the hotel workers and the labor movement and what you're involved in?
Well, I am really excited about the labor movement. I think particularly with young people, they are very pro-union, and I think we have a unique opportunity to shift the dynamic back to working people. I don't think electing politicians is the way that we're going to change this country. I think unions need to be resurrected and organize the middle class again, just like they did in the 40s and 50s. And I believe that's going to happen. And I am more excited about the labor movement than I ever have been. I think Trump has really given me extra energy to really tackle the hotel industry.
So that's an interesting point. You do differ in some ways, I think, between some of your counterparts who are very focused on policy and politics, and you seem like you're really focused on organizing. Is there a dynamic there that I'm identifying correctly, or?
No, I think that's very true, and there's been some actually heated discussions. You cannot legislate people out of poverty if you're allowing corporations to keep all the profits. Until we wrest that money from them, I don't think you're going to see the income inequality changed.
So you mean there might be some union leaders focused more on regulations and on policies when, in fact, if there was more energy, what you're arguing on organizing, like you said, that would have a greater influence than this other stuff is just on the margins?
Yes, I'm very committed to that idea.
Are there policies you think are a waste of time to be going after? I mean, we've talked about minimum wage, for example, in the past, that sort of thing.
I think that you should elect good politicians so that they can bring leverage to fights like we had them do at the strike. You know, when they went to the general manager and said, get this contract settled, that was really meaningful. I don't think I can go to the electeds and say, solve the issues for my members, because they're not going to be able to. It's going to be dressing, top dressing. It's not going to be meaningful. It's going to look nice on paper, but it's not going to really change their circumstance.
Oh, fascinating. Great. I really appreciate you coming in. I think it's been a good discussion.
Sure.
Stay in touch.
I love to give you controversial topics.
Yes,
Scott.
it's good. All right, thank you.